culture gone bad is back, and we would like to remind all our listeners that they should become our followers. And I highly encourage every single one of you to comment with your love and your hate. We will not get any better, but we would love to hear what you think. And please give us a like. And even if you hate it, give it a like as well. Because like I always say, love and hate, same thing. You'll hate us today, you will love us tomorrow. Think about all your exes.
And also, you're stealing my job, Alexandra, which I'm happy about. And also, rate the show on Spotify, because I'm very happy actually about I don't know you, but I'm very happy about the engagement that I am receiving, even private messages on Instagram whenever I post our trailers, lots of engagement. And not always it translates into an engagement on the actual platform, because people forget. Not because people are not necessarily interested, they forget. So that's why you remind them. Yeah.
Well, Juppie, I'm glad you're enjoying your private messages. Isn't it nice?
Very much so.
Oh, well, yes, send us private messages. We want to see everything, and I mean it.
Send private messages, but show public love.
So I'm a connoisseur of art, and this results in me seeing lots of art exhibitions and obviously being subscribed to many art-related newsletters. And one of them, Freeze, and I actually do enjoy going to Freeze Art Fair because I get to see many rich people. I get to see all the contemporary galleries, and the coffee there is decent. It's a nice crowd. And of course I enjoy art. Like, I don't even have to say that. So I was reading a Freeze newsletter, and they did a review of a recently published book titled, just like one of my favorite movies, Working Girl. Great 80s movie. I'm sure, Juppie, you might relate to it.
I love it, yes.
Yeah. The fashion, the actors, and
Melanie Griffith, fantastic.
I think also if you want to understand 80s, I think it's a good cultural revelation.
When she cuts her hair, that's really the moment that you can read the 80s through that lens.
Yeah, I mean, everything about it is just like dialogues, the style, and the ending and the beginning. I think, everything like fits really well. And now there is a book titled Working Girl by Sophia Giovannitti, who has many roles in this society. But essentially, from the review and research, I understood what she is a sex worker. I don't know if she is a former or she is still active. And she's also a performance artist. And the main argument of this book is what performance art and sex work are pretty much very similar. And I think the whole book explores this. I found it was a very interesting take overall, relatable to our whole society, because somehow I think we can link sex to everything. I think since Freud, everything is possible to be connected to sex, right? Every single thing we do. And I thought, what actually the reality is? We all somehow participate in selling ourselves, maybe not for sex, but for something else. I think it's inevitable part of capitalist system. So I don't think she is necessarily wrong. I just think maybe she's just trying to make it more marketable, the idea. What do you think, Juppie?
I think it's very interesting that you cite Freud, because it's true that since Freud, everything has become somehow sexualized, or we tend to see sexuality everywhere. And I am a big, Freud is one of my favorite thinkers of all times, ultimate genius. However, in Freud's view, art can be, from a Freudian point of view, art is precisely the opposite of what this girl is doing, because art is the product of a sublimation. Sublimation is when one affect, like for instance, sexuality, passes to a different level, right? So, for instance, it is precisely because there is no sex that art happens. Does it make sense? You are sublimating, you are taking the sexual energy and passing it into a different creative type of energy. So besides, there is one massive difference between when Freud wrote what he wrote and today, which is linked to this element of sexuality in the arts, which is this. If you read Freud carefully, all the neuroses at the time were generated by repression. For him, it was the oppressing effect of the superego that was creating indeed this repression that generated neuroses, for instance. But we are not there anymore. Our capitalistic society has changed things in such a way that today we do not have any repression. If anything, we have the opposite of repression. We have an injunction to enjoy. Okay, we are obliged by our superego to enjoy. We are not forbidden from enjoyment as in Freud's time, Victorian times. Okay, everything was a sin, everything was forbidden. Today, everything is forbidden precisely because everything is allowed. We are obliged to enjoy. We've got something, we coined a term, which is fear of missing out, which is precisely this. You are not allowed not to enjoy anymore. Enjoying has become enjoyment in the Lacanian sense. Enjoyment is something that has an element of destruction within itself. Now, what I don't see, you trace a parallel, or you and the artist as well, trace a parallel between being a sex worker and being an artist, because that's one type of performance art. Not really, from my point of view. Both things are legitimate. Both things are things that I am absolutely pro. I am. If you want to sell your body, fine. that's totally okay. It's your own choice. That's one of the conquests of contemporary times. A woman and a man can do with their body whatever they want. That's fantastic. But art is a different thing, because art, in my view, should work towards a concept, not towards sensory titillation. And every time you take things away from this and bring them to sensory titillation, you are actually creating the opposite of art. In other words, kitsch. Now, if you want, I've got an artwork in mind for this. Do you want me to mention it now, or shall I mention it?
Yes, tell me.
Now, one of my favorite conundrums is Giovanni Boldini. Do you like Boldini?
I wouldn't say I'm the biggest fan.
Yeah, and you are in good company, because Boldini is not universally seen as a great artist. There is no question about the fact that the beauty of his paintings is absolute. It's absolutely beautiful. The question is it art? Now, some people think, thought at the time and still today, that Boldini is actually not art, is pure kitsch. And the reason why it's pure kitsch can be found in the aesthetic construction of his paintings. If you look at the body, the models were all upper-class women who were paying a fortune to be painted by Boldini. Okay, their dresses are very quickly painted, like with the style of the Impressionists, but their faces are amazing, beautiful, unblemished. It's like an Instagram filter, basically. So for this reason, what Boldini is doing, he's convincing you he is avant-garde by painting the dresses with these very quick brush strokes, but he's not really avant-garde. He's titillating your senses. He's making, it's like indeed an Instagram filter is making these women beautiful to the senses, not beautiful to the intellectual. He's not seeking intellectual titillation, he's seeking sensory titillation. And this is the reason why many people see Boldini as kitsch, essentially. He's not making those women interesting, he's making them beautiful, which is not exactly what art is meant to do. Sorry, this is a very prescriptive, and as you know, I love prescriptive ideas.
Are you actually wearing a headscarf with Aubrey Beardsley print? It looks like Aubrey Beardsley.
Is a headscarf, is a bandana from Capital that I bought in Tokyo. And it has a cat, and then it has a naked lady, Japanese lady.
Right. I guess because I think Audrey Beardsley was very much inspired by Japanism. So I guess that's why I'm getting this vibe. It looks very nice, very
Could
Audrey
be.
Beardsley. I'm actually thinking Audrey Beardsley is a good example as well. He always, depicted, these things which Victorian society didn't want to show. Like, he would, put add candles somewhere in a painting, obviously to reference erected penis, but actually because of censorship would not allow him to draw erected penis. So he would like add these little details. I think it's always very smart.
But probably that was done, is what I was saying before about Freud. Probably even if he could do it outside of censorship, he wouldn't have done it because he wouldn't have wanted to be graphic and obvious. You want to suggest things, right?
He has some very obvious and graphic artworks indeed, actually. He has like whole like series of people masturbating, holding their dicks in hands. So he has like different. Yeah. He has some,
missed that.
Yeah, you missed. Like there are some pretty hardcore artworks by Audrey Beardsley. But nevertheless, why I think Working Girl is not wrong in her theory. Like I still stand by it. I don't think it's even about performance art. I think it's just, the context of how she approaches it. I think in capitalist system, we are always selling and buying, right? Maybe we are selling our skills, our knowledge, our ability, our contacts, and someone is looking for one of these things. So in a way, I always think also about Monet, Olympia, because, it's always one of us is always a client and another one is the prostitute. So we are always in one of these roles, in any societal roles, and it's an escape well. But then it takes me to reflection on Verso publishing overall. I have read few of their books and I do listen to their podcast. And I have to say, they are very leftist in their selection of authors, materials, and ideologies. And sometimes what I get with Verso, it's almost like gets so depressive in terms of like how they analyze the reality in which we live. I always often have a question. So, but what is the next step? Like, if it's so bad, what do we do next? Like, what's your solution? What do you prescribe? If you criticize everything, how do we move forward? And I think this is what I find very unsatisfactory. I think, if you don't like something, fine, do something about it. But the low-hanging fruit is just to whine about it and to make, everything look so dark and grotesque, like, sort of a fatalistic dead end, which I often find with them. And I just think it's a little bit unproductive.
I couldn't agree more. But isn't pessimism one intrinsic characteristic of the left? I mean, optimism in the left can only exist in utopia, but the material reality is always pessimistic, even in those places where the left actually fulfill their own dreams, such as Soviet Union, the actual socialisms. Even those are, but that's not really socialism. The real socialism has not really happened. The positive things can only exist.
I know.
Of course, it can only exist in utopia, whereas the material reality is always depressing. And I totally agree with you. I see this problem that you mentioned with Slavoj Žižek, who is one of my favorite philosophers. I read most of his books on all subjects. He's brilliant. He's a genius. He's a communist, albeit fortunately not a woke communist. I don't always agree with him, as you can imagine, but he is brilliant. And he has exactly what you're mentioning, a lot of problems and no solution to the problems. He's very good at problematizing everything. And to be honest, I'm quite tired of problematizing things. I want to start seeing solutions. Okay, solutions that are applicable, not solutions that can only exist in utopia.
In utopia, yeah. Like, yeah, I think this is a big issue we often face. You can criticize and get very dark and dramatic about everything, but the question is, at the end of the day, what do you do? You know, it's as simple as that. You know, you go to work you don't like, or you have a conflict with someone. Well, you either decide to change your job, or you address the conflict, or you end up just like, I don't know, whatever you do, you just sort of trying to find a temporary fix. And to criticize everything just doesn't bring us there. And nevertheless, Verso does a lot of really good publications. And I think some of the ideas are great. I just think the take is very dead end style. Well, anyway, thinking
what's your favorite Verso book?
New Dark Age by James Brittle. I like his sort of criticism of our society, of systems. I think it's very poetic because he doesn't just give a take on how like problematic our society is. I think he brings to our attention a lot of surreality of, you know, modern online e-commerce, interconnectivity of different satellite systems, and how people also are buying into conspiracy theories. I think there is a very dark sense of humor to it, and it's sort of this criticism while noticing surreality, which I think almost artistic level surreality in everyday life, which I actually thoroughly enjoyed. Essentially, he goes on looking at different software systems which are in place in our society. And when he goes around looking at people and how we interact with them, and his main conclusion is what everything is so messy. It's full of conspiracy theories, different beliefs. We no longer know what is going on at all in our world. And like, it's also messy and confusing and essentially surreal. And I thought that was actually, despite its darkness, is a very hilarious and spot-on book. Well, Drupi, you obviously do a lot of academic research. You are the academic, you know, whereas I'm a lady of leisure. So tell me, Drupi, what do you think about the state of academia and science?
So I think the state of academia is pretty grim in science and outside of science as well. And the problem in science is that there is a massive bias in what gets published. There have been some books about this, some flawed studies. Even Harvard has published studies with data that was ultimately discovered to be wrong and flawed. And there have been also some publications about how certain branches of science are simply flawed because of the way they conduct research. They only publish positive results, so you'd get already a biased view because you don't see the amount of negative results that are published. There is a scientist inflating results to look good, to have academic currency, and therefore to have more jobs, etc. In our world, the one that as an academic you also belong, the picture gets even more complicated, because in science you still have data. You can fake data, but you still have data, right? So, and you can check if this data is faked or not. But in our field, history of art, history of fashion, actually not history, but theory of art and theory of fashion, everything that has theory in it is pretty problematic, because how can you assess whether they are good publications or not? And very often, in my experience, they publish you not if you wrote something interesting, but if they agree with you. And this is no criteria. The problem is that the process of publication in our field is very similar to the one in science. It's the double-blind peer review process, and which is sometimes just a fake. mistake, obviously. But the problem is that it's double-blind, peer-reviewed, but they are not evaluating you on the basis of your results. They are evaluating you on the basis of how much they agree with you. Okay, I've got some papers refused because, not because they were badly written or things like that, but just because the magazine did not agree with my viewpoint, which is not what should guide literary production. It's not about agreeing. Academia is not about agreeing. It should be about disagreeing. Okay.
Yeah, this is exactly what often disappoints me about academia. This marketization, capitalization of, getting the most stunning results, getting, all these titles. And
sorry, are you talking about science now?
Well, I'm just talking about research overall. But what I'm trying to get to is what I think, any science, any academia, it should be a place to debate and to test different ideas. Even though we might sound odd or strange, we might actually get some ultimate truth. Because, a lot of discoveries, a lot of things which our society acknowledges today probably was shocking 100 years ago or were completely unacceptable. And in order to achieve this, we need to have not an environment where we're looking for the most splendid data, strong facts, or maybe some agreement. It's not about, hugging each other and holding each other's hands. It's about being open-minded to hearing ideas which may be uncomfortable, but nevertheless they are true.
Yeah, exactly. So, for instance, in today's world, it's very difficult to investigate in disciplines such as psychology, for instance, very difficult to investigate things like intelligence, because you may find out that some social groups score higher than others. And another thing that is very debated is sex differences. We know that differences exist amongst social groups and amongst even sexes. We know that there are average not absolute differences, but average differences. And it's becoming more and more difficult to investigate because nobody wants to know that there are differences. The assumption should be, everybody's the same, even though we know it's not, And the same thing with personality research. We know that personality, there are some scientific ways of measuring personality. They can be criticized, like the 5-factor personality model. They can be criticized, but ultimately we know that they have predictive power. Certain personality characteristics predict success in life, and certain personality characteristics predict problems in life, So it shouldn't be taken as prescriptive, obviously, but it may be good to know more about those things, not because we want to put people in boxes, which is what is usually used to counter those approaches. Not for that. We should know because we should take action and probably give more support to people who struggle more. So it should be done with the best possible spirit, Another thing that is genetic studies are in some areas like psychology are becoming problematic. Genetic studies, you don't want to find out that some people have genetic predisposition towards certain things as well. So,
like what things?
Well, for instance, as I was mentioning, intelligence, or there are also new studies about the fact that trauma could be inherited. I remember this surreal conversation. I was with one of my professors of psychology, and one boy asked a question that I think was a very intelligent question. They said, "What do you think about intergenerational trauma?" Now, intergenerational trauma is a trauma that you never lived, but you inherited from your parents or grandparents, right? So, for instance, your grandparents were victims of the Holocaust, or were in the camps, and you may have inherited some of this trauma yourself. And when this guy asked this question, the professor went nuts. He said, "No, these studies are flawed because they were conducted on rats." And by that point, it was great. So let's conduct them, let's conduct these studies on humans, maybe, to see if there is some such a thing as intergenerational trauma. And then the discourse shifted. It was no more a problem of methodology, as it seemed at the beginning. It was, yeah, we shouldn't do it, because if we clarify that there is intergenerational trauma, this will mean that, you will consider people traumatized, therefore we will not help them because they have an inherited, and I was like, no, to quote Margaret Thatcher, right? The very famous speech. No, the point is, you do those studies even if they're uncomfortable, because it's like saying we shouldn't study, I don't know, the physics because it could lead to the atomic bomb. I mean, this is already did. Exactly. This is not an argument, because it's true that those studies gave us the atomic bomb, but they also gave us nuclear power that helped, societies in many ways. So you can't say, yeah, but this could be used in the wrong way, therefore let's not study it. That's not the point. Yeah, when the professor said the studies are flawed because they are conducted on rats, I was on board, because he was giving me a methodological reason why the studies were flawed. That was okay. The problem is when he said, no, but we shouldn't conduct them anyway, not even on rats, because we don't want to discover the truth. Really?
Yes, at times. By the way, do you know, some of our listeners told me, like on a conversation about gender transition, since this whole new direction in Russia and the war, they banned any transgender operation, and people who did transition before and got married, they are now denouncing all the marriages, so they're becoming annullated.
Wow. Wow. And the funny thing is that when Prigozhin was about to take over Putin, a lot of commentators said, let's hope it doesn't succeed, because Prigozhin is actually much worse than Putin. How can that be? It's a very difficult conversation. Oh, I didn't know that, but it's very scary. I think it's because the one thing, and I don't know, it's just an idea and probably is wrong, but one thing that I noticed about the Russia in contemporary times is that the Orthodox Church is very, very influential, like really influential. And the church has been condemning the Western liberalism on matters on sex and gender. So probably there's a way to, I don't know.
Bad news for gays who want to get married in Orthodox Church in Russia. they are marginalized. They are being marginalized because they're intersectional, right? Intersectional discrimination. They're gay and they're Russian.
I think it's very funny that old men with big beards and a skirt criticize men with skirts. So it's very funny.
Yeah, I mean, what can I say? Russia is a very special place with this. It always has been, but I think I'm a type of person who tries to live in a moment and embrace the present. But frankly, I prefer Russia from 19th century, with beautiful books, language, and history and culture.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, indeed. Well, back to the reality of the UK. So UK government is going to announce a cap on low-value university degrees to ensure the employability of graduates, which I think is quite interesting sign maybe of what we discussed about academia somehow and research in general, what we are looking for: results, performance, and statistics, because it's a capitalistic system. But also I think it's a little bit interesting, what do we consider to be low value in our society? Because I think ironically sometimes things which can be perceived to be low value bring much more value to our society. Like, maybe you think economic degrees bring a lot of financial value because maybe all the students get a job, but maybe art curators don't, but it doesn't mean what art curator could not influence our society in a much more profound way, which moves us forward.
I guess yes, but from a statistical point, no.
Yeah, but you know, I'm not a
Because
statistics woman.
yeah, I know,
You
but
are
you
a
don't need
statistics man.
you don't need as many art curators as you need bankers. And the problem, I think, is that this capitalistic system of academia, precisely because it's so expensive to study in England, promised everyone that they could fulfill their dreams. And that is simply not true. So I think it is potentially interesting what Rishi Sunak is doing, because you should not create false illusion on people. You should not convince everyone that they can be whatever they want to be. This is simply not true. Okay, especially if those people investing 30,000 pounds for in a degree are from finish their degree with a massive debt, and they have no way to repay it because their degree doesn't lead them to their dream career. So instead of having amazing art curators, you will end up having a lot of frustrated, aspiring art curators who work in Nando's, and you don't want that. So I do see the problem with the marketization of university. At the same time, given that the thing to do should be to lower the taxes of universities. That's it. But until you pay for it, until you have to pay to go to university, as it is in England and in the States, then you better tell people, you better restrict. I mean, you better educate people about what they can do with their degrees. You don't want working class people going into careers that promising them that they can become something that you can only actually do if you are already rich. You know what I mean? You cannot delude people. Okay. So this is the first thought I have. So I do see the problem. I don't think, you know, the solution should be to work on lowering the taxes. Not on convincing people that they can be whatever they want to be, because this is simply not true. You know, unless you are a communist who lives in utopia, right? As we were mentioning before.
I don't know. I'm just thinking about art curating fried chicken in Nando's. So I'm thinking, no.
But that's what will happen. You'll have a lot of people. I mean, I have a lot in Italy. You don't pay for university as much as you pay for in England, so it's very, very cheap. But Italians don't know it's cheap because they have it, so they think it's so expensive. And I know a lot of people who will never become philosophers, and with a philosophy degree, and they are sales assistants, and it's just not marketable. You know, it's very sad because they have been convinced that you need to fulfill to chase your dreams. Well, yes, if you can back it up with capital. If you don't have capital, then it's a big problem. The state is convincing you of something that is simply not true, and you'll have to deal with this with your frustration. So this is the first thing. The second thing that I wanted to say is this. I find it very funny that this is coming from a conservative man, which should be all about deregulation. And actually, it is becoming about regulation. So the last thing I would expect from a conservative is putting more rules and regulations, whereas what I see is that he's putting regulations. So I don't think it's a very conservative move. I think it's a very I don't know, repress. It is the opposite of what conservatives preach, which is let's reduce the rules in the marketplace, and let's let the market go the way that it wants to go.
Maybe
so
it's
very fun.
To Nando.
Exactly. Maybe Rishi Sunak is not convinced everyone that he is much more conservative than he actually is.
No, maybe he just went to Nando's and he thought a conversation with a waiter was so philosophical. He didn't even understand what he ordered, and he wants to take it down a little bit. So actually, they start their career in Nando's and not in a philosophy degree. I don't know.
Maybe.
Or maybe he feels like Prada shoes don't live up to standards he used to expect, and he needs more people working in factories manufacturing with Prada shoes.
Exactly. No, I found it funny that somebody said that this bill would hinder working class and racial minorities. And I was like, okay, if you look at the representation of working class and racial minorities in the arts is lower than white wealthy people. But this is not because the system is oppressive. This is for the simple reason that their parents, when they encourage their children to go to university, obviously, because they've been through rough times, they encourage their children to go to universities that actually give them
Security.
yes, security. So they would encourage them to become doctors or pharmacists or, you know, something
Lawyers.
that can actually,
Yeah.
or lawyers. And I cannot blame them. You know, I myself was given full freedom from my parents. I was not encouraged to go in a certain direction. And probably I would have liked, because my parents are also working class, and probably I would have liked to have more guidance and them to tell me, look, maybe you will struggle more if you do this, because, you know, you'll have to count on yourself. So from my working class perspective, I don't think this is a taboo discussion to be had. Only extremely motivated people should become art curators and philosophers. Only those. If you're not extremely motivated or extremely talented, maybe you should be, you know, you should go
Maybe
into
you should
a
work
career.
at Nando's.
Or maybe you should work at Nando's. Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, you know, it's funny you say about family motivation. Like, yeah, my parents also never encouraged me to go in any direction. I mean, somehow we managed to divert me from Nando's as well. But you know what? I know some people who were very much guided by their parents in their career choices. And I think they highly despise them for them. And later in life, they had some massive middle life crisis, like, you know, living their corporate career and becoming yoga instructors and trying to find themselves through spiritual means. I think none of this works somehow. I think, you know.
Hold on. Yes, that I can understand. But I was talking about, I was not encouraging parents to be oppressive. That's not what I was saying at all, because I agree with you. What I'm saying is that you shouldn't have the idea that the humanities, which is what low value usually means, is for everybody. It's only for the so the state should tell, you know, should give you an indication. Maybe this is less productive. Maybe you will be less, you know, for degrees. Then if you want to become a yoga instructor, it's a different story.
Yeah, but the government should make.
So it should be based on merit. That's it. It should be based on merit, and it shouldn't be that the state tells people, yeah, great, you can do whatever you want. No, you can't. Some people can't do whatever they want, and they should know this.
Well, yeah, government can just say, you know, the reality is you can become a coach surfing philosopher for the rest of your life. As long as you understand that, well, you go
exactly.
for it. Well, Drupi, on this note, do you have anything else you want to share?
No, I think we discussed our artworks as well.
Yeah, we did indeed. Well, I mean, college is looking very bleak today for some reason.
Jesus, today we are very, very bleak.
Yeah, and we are very, very bitchy. I don't know what's happening. Well, I mean, this is just like what's happening in the world, right? We're not making it up. Well, until next time, I don't think culture will go any better, but
oh no, we will
bad.
We will always have a spot, Alexandra, because culture will never go well. So we will always have something to talk about.
Yeah, there are many opportunities.
Not even in utopia there is happiness. That's the sad truth. So that's where the communists get it wrong. Not even utopia gives you.
I think utopia, like speaking of utopia, I think utopia always goes into dystopia. And you know what? It also means what love goes into hate. So please give us a like, share, review, and follow us. And until next time, culture gone bad.
And feel free to suggest also some topics that you want us to comment on. We are very happy to take your suggestions. Okay.
Yeah.
Comment
or you can send us
topics
DMs, and we are happy to see what you have to share with us.
Yes. Also send nudes if you want. It's fine.
Yeah. We can discuss what we got. All right. Till next time. Culture gone bad.
Very bad.